I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm doing a ratings breakdown of my 2020 reviews. That sounded a little weird in my head, so to be clear, that means my reviews from the year 2020. So all of the reviews I did across 2020, I'm doing a bit of a ratings breakdown on this. In fact, I'm going to be doing this for every single year from 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. At some point I'll do 2025, but we're still in 2025, so that will take some time to get to. This has been a little project I've been working on for the past 6 months-ish. Whenever I had an hour free, I would go through my reviews and just start logging all the reviews I had because they were not properly logged in order to kind of go through every single video I've done on YouTube under the review category and transcribing that review over so I can start plugging things into a little database and looking at it all. This is going to be a series of at least 5 videos, one for each, well, at least 6 videos, possibly a 7th. There's going to be one for each year, then a full summary of where we are to date, and then possibly one where I show you the data on the computer, because I think that maybe that might make for a good live video. I'm curious. Maybe I'll do it live. We'll see. We'll figure it out. Point is that now I have all the data and I can crawl through it and I can do little fun graphs and aggregates and averages and all these things to get a general idea of, well, my reviews to a certain extent. So, with that said, 2020 had 72 reviews, which makes sense. I started doing videos in 2019, and I think I did 1 or 2 things that might be counted as a review, but, and this is where it's important to note there's going to be some caveats to how things work. The first caveat is whenever I review a game and I reviewed it later, I counted the later date. This is most relevant for things that are prototypes, but there are some times where it's different. So for example, in 2019, I think the only game I actually have as reviewed in 2019 is Zombicide Black Plague, because I never really reviewed it since then. I did a comparison between Black Plague and Cthulhu Death May Die, and so I counted that as a review. And then later I properly reviewed Cthulhu Death May Die, so it got the new date for when I reviewed it. That said, these are all counting my original ratings for the game, meaning I do have in my own systems, I have the rating I gave when I filmed it, and then later if I updated that rating, which sometimes happens, not a ton, but it does happen here and there, and I'm going to be talking about both. I'm going to be talking about things that changed in this video, but I'm going to be focusing, all my initial numbers are focused on the original rating I gave. So, 2020 was outside of Zombicide Black Plague. 2020 was when I started reviewing games properly. I had 72 reviews across the course of that year, mostly happening in the second half of that year. When I first got into YouTube, I didn't really do a ton of reviews. It was very infrequent. It was almost always when it was a game that I already played and liked and wanted to share it. Most of my content at first was more conversational, more top 10 lists, really not focusing on trying to review games. That came later, which also means that my first year or two of reviews, the ratings skewed a little higher on average. And you'll see this as we go through year by year, but in 2020 and 2021, they definitely skewed a little higher, and then in later years, they dipped off. The average fell off very, very high. To that end, from those 72 reviews, my average rating was a 3.69. I rate on a 5-point scale with 0.5s, otherwise known as a 10-point scale. That's not going to be the conversation here, but yes, effectively, which means I have ratings from 1.5s and 2s and 2.5s, etc., all the way up to a 5, but I don't do a 3.6. I do a 3.5 or a 4. That said, due to the nature of averages, when you're talking about 72 reviews, the average rating was a 3.69. The most common rating was a 4, but there's more things skewed a little bit below a 4 than there are things above a 4. Meaning, even though the most common rating is a 4, there's more things that dipped lower. There's more 3.5s and 3s, let's say, than there are 4.5s and 5s. That's why the average drifts towards 3.69, a drop higher than a 3.5. To that end, the full breakdown of my reviews over the course of 2020, where I had one game that was rated a 1.5. I didn't have anything lower than that. My lowest rating was a 1.5. That went to one game. 2 games got a 2. 3 games got a 2.5, 10 games got a 3. This makes sense. It's something I've said in general, where in general, the bulk of my ratings are going to be at that 3.5 ratio-ish. And that's because most games are pretty good. It takes a lot for me to not enjoy the game. Usually the question is, how much did I enjoy you, and what do I enjoy more? So we had 10 games rated a 3. We had 21 games rated a 3.5 and 24 games rated a 4. This is actually surprising to me because I have frequently said that a 3.5 is my most common rating, which, by the way, is true, just not in 2020. Across all time, 3.5 is my most common rating, but definitely as things picked up, my ratings got a little bit lower on average. In 2020, for my 72 reviews, 24 of them were rated a 4. And by the way, I looked through them. I scrolled through all of them to see if I was like too favorable on any of them, and I really wasn't. Like, I stand by all those ratings. I think that they're pretty solid games. All those 4s were pretty solid to me. The only thing I think that is true is I think early on at that point, I was more reviewing things that I was excited about and less just taking things on for review. Most of the games I reviewed in 2020 were games that were personally in my collection. I didn't really start working with publishers on a larger scale until late 2020, early 2021, and that's when things shifted a bit, which is why my most common rating is a 4 with 24 4s. I had 3 4.5s and 5 5s. So 5 games in 2020, I gave a 5. To that end, I will go through the 4.5s and the 5s because it's low enough. I don't know if I'm going to do the same format in each of these videos because the amount of reviews keeps getting higher, so I can't necessarily do the same format. But in 2020, my 3 4.5s were Dead Reckoning, Dune Imperium, and Under Falling Skies, of which Dead Reckoning has dropped to a 4. And Dune Imperium and Under Falling Skies, those have stayed just fine, stayed standing. Speaking of which, for my 3.5s and lower, well, you know, let's talk about changes soon. Let's get to the changes parts separately. So I had 3 4.5s, Dead Reckoning, Dune Imperium, and Under Falling Skies. I had 8 5 out of 5s. That's Seventh Continent, Seventh Citadel, the prototype at the time, Endless Winter, Food Chain Magnet, Arnak, Lost Winds of Arnak, Machina Arcana, Rurik, and Vindication. Those were my 8 5 out of 5s in 2020. Again, a lot of games that I was really excited about that were for my personal, like, from those, I think the review copies were 7 Citadel and Endless Winter. I think those are the only 2, like, review copies. Again, like, I did less review copies back then. A lot of it was just me being excited as a gamer. I'm still excited as a gamer, but I definitely do a lot more review copies now. Which brings us to the changes over 2020. I told you my average rating was 3.69, but that's if I look at the original rating. So the original rating I gave a game, the average was 3.69. If I look at the current ratings for games, the average drops to 3.64, meaning there's a degree of dropping over time, which, by the way, I think that's always, I haven't checked every year, but I think that's likely going to stay true across the board, because I think in general, it is more likely that a game drops than it rises. There are 2 games I noticed specifically that rose, and part of this, by the way, is because anything that's a 3.5 or lower, most of the time I don't keep those. So those don't really have an opportunity to drop a lot. It's more that the things that are 4s and higher, those can either go down or they can go up. And it's a lot easier for a game to wear over time and for me to see the muddy spots as I get more and more plays in, or to be less enamored by a game once I've played it 10 times. Like, that's more common than it is for me to see the greatness of a game as I play it more. That said, as far as the 2 games that did go up, we had 2 games going from 4s to 5s. Not to 4.5s, directly to 5s. Well, I shouldn't say directly, because technically they may have changed partially in between. I only track 2 things, the original rating and the current rating. I don't track the progress over time, so I don't actually know if they were progress over time. But we had Critters at War, which originally I rated a 4, and I love that game. It's so good. It's a 5 out of 5 to me. I've talked so much about it. I love it. But originally, I just liked it a lot, and I gave it a 4. Similarly, Marvel Champions, at first I bounced off it. By the time I reviewed it, it was a 4 out of 5. And then over time, it's a 5 out of 5 game that I absolutely love and adore. So Marvel Champions and Critters at War went from 4s to 5s over time. The ones that dropped, we had Dead Reckoning dropping from a 4.5 to a 4. I think Dead Reckoning is great, but over enough plays, it's a little repetitive and a little long and has some rough spots. It's still great. I still think it's a solid game, but it definitely did drop down half a point. And the others that all dropped were in the 5s. A lot of my 5s dropped down half a point, and I think I may have been too... And that's something I don't yet know to what extent it's changed over time. I think over time I've gotten more conservative about what I give a 5, but these games all dropped from a 5 to a 4.5. Although, to be fair to myself to a small degree, when I rated games originally at this time, I don't think I gave half points at the time. When I originally introduced my rating scale, I gave full points. So it was more common that games got a direct number, and then over time I shifted it once I introduced half point scales. But nonetheless, we had 5 games for my 5s dropped. Only 3 are left standing at a 5 out of 5. The 3 that are standing are Lost Winds of Arnak, Vindication, and Rurik, which are all amazing games, and I don't anticipate them changing at all. The ones that dropped, Endless Winter dropped from a 5 to a 4.5. As much as I like Endless Winter, Arnak and Dune Imperium really took the lead over there to a large extent once the expansions were introduced. And Endless Winter has expansions, but I don't think the expansions make the game better. And so while I still love it, it's still in my collection, it's not going anywhere, it did drop from a 5 to a 4.5. Machina Arcana and Seventh Continent and Food Chain Magnet and Seventh Citadel, all of those dropped less because the shine and more because they are just harder to table games. And that is something that I don't think I gave enough credit to factoring that into my rating early on. It's something that, honestly, it may have taken a few years for me to give games that credit of saying, hey, if you're hard enough to table that I'm not pulling you off the shelf as much, that means that the rating's going to be lower. It means that if something about the level of enjoyment I'm having is not enough to have me, and to be fair, it's not that I lower the rating if it's hard to table. It's that if the hardness to table versus the enjoyment makes it so that I don't table it that frequently, that's a factor in the rating. Versus a game that might be really, really hard to table, but I like it enough that screw it, we're going to make it happen, that can still get a 5 out of 5. And again, we might see this in future years because it took me a while to really adapt to the fact that it doesn't matter how much I like you, if I don't pull you off the shelf and play you, I should reflect that in the rating. I can't go ahead and give a 5 out of 5 to a game that I'm not really pulling off the shelf as frequently as I would like. And Seventh Continent, Seventh Citadel, big, giant box, ambitious games. I've had a lot of fun with them, but I moved on from them. Still at a 4.5, but they definitely dropped down a little bit, and they're just hard-to-table campaign games. Versus Food Chain Magnet and Machina Arcana, I still have those. Food Chain Magnet, I just find as a brain burner, and I'm not always interested in introducing new players to it or tabling it, because it's really a crunchy game where you can't afford to let anything slide in that game. You are full on from the second you table it all the way through. And Machina Arcana is a great game. I just need to play it more. That one's the kind of game that I can see myself bumping it. I can see myself wanting to bump it out to a 5, like a second I sit down and play it again. But it has been a while, and it's just not the easiest game to table from my various dungeon crawlers. So that's my current 2020 breakdown. Again, I'll be doing this throughout the years for 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. It will get longer. These videos will get slightly longer as we do the longer years because the reviews only started picking up steam in 2020, and they rapidly accelerated. I think once we hit 2022 is where the numbers really jumped. 2021 was still a medium-ish year, and 2022 is where the total reviews on the channel started to really climb up. Any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this relevant or useful in some way, shape, or form. And as always, and until next time, I hope you have a good one.